Well, there's once a familiar sight on many British high streets to see men wearing sandwich boards declaring the end of the world is nigh. The sandwich boards may have gone, but the message hasn't. Here in Glasgow and in many other British cities, evangelical missionaries have come from the United States proclaiming the same message. And there are some homegrown, doom-mongering churches too. Why do they think the world's about to end? Because the Bible says it will happen when people become lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Sounds like our audience this morning. And when this happens, Jesus will come again to judge the world and rebuke it for its sins. Are the end times imminent? Dr. Mark Vincent, the Sterling Christadelphians. You've studied this?
Yeah, absolutely.
PhD in theology and biblical studies. What are the signs?
So there's a number of signs. There are some sort of general background signs of the passage that you've just quoted would give you some of those. You know, we've had the Noah movie just released. I've not actually seen it yet, but and Jesus actually said...
That movie, is it that bad? It's going to lead to the end of the world.
Well, so it's interesting that Jesus said there's going to be parallel between how things were in Noah's day and how things are going to be before his coming. And what's that about? That's about violence in society. You know, we've had more people massacred in the last century than and that's just a result of, you know, the exponential growth of technology and weaponry and those sorts of things.
But in the 100,000 years of human history and the 4.5 billion years of our world, 65 million years since the dinosaurs became extinct, there have been ups and downs. There have been ins and outs.
There have, but I think it's interesting how, you know, so many things have changed exponentially in recent times. You know, if you think about population, the consumption of resources, technology, communication, the ability to travel.
What will happen? Talk us through it.
Okay.
Right.
So a key point here, and to make this a bit more specific, the Bible has a lot to say about Jerusalem. Okay?
No, I mean, but Jesus will come back to the earth. I want to know what will happen then and how it will happen.
So actually, the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, so that's 2,500 years ago. The New Testament, Jesus said that the end of times wouldn't come until the Jews were back in the land of Palestine. Okay. Well, that's not a political comment.
No, that's not a sign.
That's a sign, right?
But what will happen?
So that's only been the case since 1948.
What will happen?
And then the Bible also talks about a geopolitical crisis.
Yeah, I know that.
That will be
centered. What will happen?
That will be centered on Jerusalem.
Okay. But what will this look like? Jesus coming back to earth.
But that's quite remarkable, isn't it? Yeah. There's Jerusalem right in the centre of the map. It's the debated point of three major world religions.
When Jesus comes down, what will happen?
And that's the fantastic news, really.
That's fantastic news.
What will happen is that Jesus will become the future king of the world. So, you know, we've talked about some of the disillusionment of politics. We've talked about...
What will it... king of the world, what will the world be like?
Well, so there's obviously a lot of work to do. There's a lot of redistribution of resources. There is enough food in the world to feed people.
So Jesus will be the world...
Despite our best efforts.
He'll be the head of world government.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've not...
will it be democracy or will he be a dictator?
We would... theoretically, we would like to be able to feed everyone, but you know, we've not achieved it. Who better could there be to actually lead these initiatives
than Jesus?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Chris, you're a man of religion. Is it? I mean, he wants the end of the world to come in a sense, or a new phase. Is this dangerous thinking?
I think it's very dangerous thinking. I think in American politics, for example, you can see how the sort of legitimate the handling of the Palestinian problem, for example, it's okay, it's meant to happen, therefore let it happen. And these people are being oppressed.
A self-fulfilling prophecy.
And so it's self-fulfilling, and that's the kind of thing that happens.
But there's lots of it in the Bible, though, isn't there?
But it's a total misunderstanding of the Bible. It's a total misunderstanding of what eschatology is. The Jewish people had this image of a loving God who was always with them. But what their experience told them, they were in slavery in Egypt, they were taken away by the Babylonians, they were hammered by the Assyrians, they were under occupation by the Romans, and they were saying, for goodness sake, when is God going to sort all this out? And effectively, the whole eschatology was about
End of the
when
world,
is
yeah.
God going to come and clear up this mess?
Yeah.
It wasn't about the end of the world. It was when is God going to put his program of love into action? That's what it was about.
But, Alec, you think we are in end times, don't you?
Yes, I do, and I'm not a scientist, and I'm not a mathematician or
But-
anyone like that. I believe the Bible totally to be true.
Literally.
Oh, yeah, literally true.
Lot's wife turned into
And
a
I
pillar
would be
of salt.
happy to debate with
the whole lot,
anybody
yeah.
all day long.
Okay, but tell us about the end times.
Right. Well, the end times begins, according to Jesus, is when the Jews are back in Israel.
Right.
And he says this, he said, Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles until the age of the Gentiles is finished. 14th of May, 1948, Ezekiel prophesied in Ezekiel chapter 37 that the dry bones would come to life again when God would take the Jewish people
What other portents
out of
are there?
exile and bring them into the promised land. Now,
What other
so-
portents are there?
well, the other portents, Jesus says in his sermon in Matthew 24, he said there would be famines, there would be wars.
There's always been famines.
There's always been famines,
always
but
been
if you check the exponential growth of famines from the 15th century to the 20th century,
Climate change.
climate change,
Yeah.
because it says in Luke's Gospel, chapter 21, it says that there will be tsunamis, it says there will be tremendous floods, there will be chaos in the
So,
world.
okay, right. So what will
so
happen?
all of these
no,
things
no,
are
no, no.
happening.
Please, what will happen?
Can I just say then...
We haven't got time because I want to bring other people in.
The
And I'm
Bible,
sure there's a whole litany
Ezekiel
of
36,
predictions.
it says there will be a major invasion by Russia, Turkey, Iran, Libya, Ethiopia.
It says that in the Bible.
Yeah, it says that in the Bible. Ezekiel 38. You can read it for yourself. Now, it says they will invade Jerusalem and God will send floods, hail, fire upon them. It says that the people in Jerusalem were going to suffer terribly in the very last days, and then the end will come.
Okay.
I think this is a terrible thing.
Well, that's what the Bible says. Is the Bible a
Well,
terrible
I
thing?
mean, what actually happened...
Is the Bible a terrible thing? Look, can I say this, Nicky? The Bible says...
Who thinks the
that in
Bible's a terrible
last
thing?
days,
I mean,
St. Peter says in the last
Wait,
days...
wait.
Scoffers will come.
Wait.
Skeptics will come.
Yeah.
Peter says that. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 4.
What will happen to those who don't...
Scoffers in the last days.
What will happen
And
to those
there
who
they
don't...
are. Look at them.
Whoa.
There they are.
What will happen to those who don't believe?
They go to hell. No, and then, yes, there we are, the scoffers. Not only will you go to hell, after hell, the lake of fire.
More?
Nicky.
That's what the Bible says. You know that.
Not the lake of fire.
Well, don't say
You know that. You know that.
don't say they're going to hell and point to Charles Kennedy.
Saint Peter was so right. The last days, he says, the last days, you will be skeptics and scoffers.
Reverend, can you come back next week? Charles Kennedy.
There was an old joke, wasn't there, about the Reverend Ian Paisley when he was at the height of his powers, and he said, "In the day of reckoning, there'll be anguish and there'll be suffering and hardship and gnashing of teeth." And this old lady in the congregation said, "But Reverend Paisley, I don't have any teeth." And he said, "Teeth will be provided." You know, I can only say...
Wasn't that good?
I must have bought a different edition of the Bible from the one I've just been hearing about. I really do.
No, can I say this, Charles? I would love to
In a
debate-
minute, Alec, I want to bring somebody
Because
else.
that is the Bible.
I want to bring another sinner in.
version.
We are all sinners. I want to bring another one in. Ian Scott from the Glasgow Skeptics.
Hello.
It's all in the Bible. You heard Alec.
Skeptics.
Yes.
You know, the
Skeptics.
Greek for
Don't start
skeptics
you
is-
on skeptics.
The Greek for skeptics is that's for dog. Dogs. The Bible says there's no dogs in heaven. It's actually skeptics. It's actual Greek word.
No dogs in heaven. My dog's going to be there, I'll tell you. He's
No. Yes, so will mine. But but skeptics.
Only good dogs.
The Bible says, yeah.
Right. Okay,
I feel
sorry.
all the other dogs in hell as well. I definitely think the end times are coming, absolutely. But perhaps not in quite the same time scale that you do. You know, scientists...
I haven't got a time scale.
Well, oh, interesting. I think, well, so let me ask you this then. If you do think the end times are imminent, what sort of timescale do you have? Have you been collecting pensions? When the roof caves in, do you decide to patch it up or just think, it'll probably not matter tomorrow? What do you do? Have you planned the rest of your life?
You said to me earlier on, maybe
Do you want to ask
about
a question then?
2016. Is that
No,
right?
2016. No, this was a
After the referendum, anyway.
John Brown Day of Independence. John Brown of Hamilton. I say if it gets a yes vote, it will be the end of the world. There it goes again. Yeah. Do you know this? It's like
2016.
this is a pack. We used to do this at university. Pack the audience of the democratic decision with all the people that believe the same thing and get away. And that's not democracy.
Chris,
Nicky, there's a history to this.
2016 and counting.
There was a 19th century preacher called Nelson Darby who started all this, introducing all these words called John Nelson Darby. These words like rapture and all these things didn't exist in the Bible. Then there was a guy like Schofield in 1909 who wrote the Schofield Bible, and in it he had a lot of notes and picking passages here and all this detailing the end of the world. And this Bible sold very popular, and this whole cult, you can call it, this dangerous cult, got off the ground. And then you got the Left Behind series, which is a whole lot of fiction about how this whole world's going to end.
And Chris, you made the point earlier on, there is a strain of, I think there's a bit of it in all over the world. In Iran, of course, they're waiting for the lost prophet to come there, and there's a kind of apocalyptic millenarian thing there. And also in America, of course, but there are people who actively want this to happen, aren't they?
Yeah, they want it to happen for them. It's all these signs, all these disasters about the end of the world, but what it actually is doing is negating their responsibility for addressing things.
No, I don't. And neither does God. I can speak for God because I've got... Yeah.
You said that I...
Nobody else is speaking for... But you're speaking for God, but the character of your God is a violent murderer, really.
No.
It's not a loving God.
Are you a minister?
Yes.
Do you preach from the pulpit that God is a violent murderer?
No, I do not.
But it does say in the Old Testament that he killed people.
But that's the kind of God that you're talking about. What's the character of your God as I see it is represented in Jesus?
That's absolutely.
It's a loving, inclusive, compassionate God. And this God's going to annihilate the world. In what way does that weigh against...
Now let me ask you a question. Can I ask you a question?
Right.
Does Jesus talk more about hell or about heaven?
Does Jesus talk more about love or hell?
No, hold on.
He talks more about love.
He talks much more about hell because he loves us.
No, Jesus talks more about...
I think it's time for
what
Pat.
goes on in this world.
It's Pat time.
Pat time.
Because Pat, you've been wanting to come in, Pat.
Two things I really must say.
Are you an end times person?
Well, the thing is, the question was, are the end times imminent? Now, in the scriptures, it tells us that in the eyes of God, in the light of eternity, 1,000 years is but a day. So we could have, yes, we are. The key sign of the end times is apostasy. People, godlessness. People have, and we've seen that all morning. No offence, but we've seen it all morning. A complete godlessness. And Nicky, there's a more recent prophecy about the end times, which has the blessing of the church, and the church does not lightly encourage us to go after like private apparitions and things.
Which one? There've been 34 predictions of the end times.
How many? Wait, this is interesting. How many predictions?
There have been 34 predictions, individual predictions of the end times since the year 2000. We're actually entering a new one in 2 days' time. I'm looking forward to it very much.
Jesus said he didn't know when the end times would be.
This is not a prediction.
It's not a prediction. Let's go to... Charles, you're conducting the debate now.
Well, no, I'm not, but I'm genuinely interested in the research that's been done. You keep asking the correct question. What will happen? Now, you must have dealt with people, kind of people that go to the top of Ben Nevis, because the world is going to come to an end at 4 o'clock next Wednesday afternoon, and it doesn't, and they have to come back down again. They do this. Now, when you deal with people, when you've interviewed people for research like that, it's not what will happen, but what didn't happen. What do they say?
So I think there's... that gets into the question of how people interpret the Bible and people, trying to predict specific dates and that. And
Nicky Campbell says the world's going to blow up.
The Bible
1 minute before we're off here, and it doesn't. What does he say in the final minute of the show?
To try and predict the end of the world. That's not what it's about. What it gives is a broad scenario, and it looks, there are really interesting correspondences between what the Bible predicts and the broad period that we're now living in.
Sounds like a politician's answer.
I think that's interesting.
Jesus coming to earth. Let's take some